Let me start all over again. Good afternoon, everybody. The Wallace Business Forum, in partnership with the Management Association of the Philippines, MAP, the Financial Executives Institute of the Philippines, FINEX, and the Foundation for Economic Freedom, FEF, presents the Wallace Business Forum Roundtable discussion with Secretary Arsenio Balisacan of the National Economic and Development Authority. Today's roundtable is sponsored by PMFTC, the Philippine affiliate of Philip Morris International. Now, let's get started. To deliver the welcome remarks, we call the presidents of the four organizations responsible for putting this event together. Attorney Du Baladad, President of MAP, Jose Luis F. Gomez, Executive Vice President of FINEX, Calixto Chiquiamco, President of FEF, and Peter Wallace, Chairman and Founder of the Wallace Business Forum. Let's call on Attorney Benedicta Du Baladad. Mic to you, Attorney.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the Board of Governors and the 1,100 members of the Management Association of the Philippines, I would like to thank the Wallace Business Forum for inviting MAP to co-present this roundtable discussion on regional comprehensive economic partnership, what's in store for us, with no less than the Secretary of NEDA as our guest to talk about this important development in our regional economic history. We have been supporting and had pushed for the ratification of RCEP in many ways. As we stressed in all our MAP's past statements, RCEP will provide the country's producers of various exportable products with easier access to markets of other RCEP countries, and at the same time, provide broader and cheaper alternative sources of inputs, reduce cost of doing business through improved trade facilitation, especially customs and trade clearance procedures. Most of all, we see this as a tool to enable the Philippines to compete on equal footing with our ASEAN and Asian partners that are already in RCEP in terms of attracting foreign investments. In MAP, we have taken as our flagship project for this year, 2023, a campaign against child malnutrition and stunting. The role of RCEP in this campaign is very important, as it would provide the country with a wider and cheaper access to food by opening competition in agriculture and supporting food value chain management through more liberal trade arrangements. And now that I have the attention of the Secretary of NEDA, may I digress a little and let me take this opportunity to appeal to the Secretary to put malnutrition and child stunting as a top national concern that must be addressed by everyone, especially by the government and by the business sector. Thanks again to the Senate for getting the Philippines on board to take advantage of the wealth of opportunities that RCEP offers to Filipinos in terms of expanded jobs, increased incomes, and better life. We in MAP hope that after this session, we will appreciate more the importance of the country's membership in RCEP. So thank you very much.
To our keynote speaker, NEDA Secretary Arsenio Balisacan, to our panelists and fellow FINEX members, Mr. Peter Wallace, Attorney Dick Du Baladad, and Mr. Ed Francisco, to Foundation for Economic Freedom President, Mr. Calixto Chiquiamco, and to all the participants who are joining us online. Good afternoon. FINEX is one with the country in its efforts towards recovery, with its thrust this year to forge ahead and accelerate inclusive and sustainable growth. FINEX aims to leave the pandemic behind and to move forward with the most relevant activities and events for its members, as well as the community at large. That is why Phoenix is happy to be part of this roundtable discussion, which ultimately touches on the government's efforts towards positive economic and social transformation. This roundtable discussion is expected to cover the Philippine Development Plan for 2023 to 2028, to touch on the economic outlook of the country, and to discuss the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or RCEP. As such, this promises to be an interesting and informative forum for all. So sit back and stay tuned. Thank you and have a good day.
Good afternoon to all the FEF fellows who have joined this meeting. We hope everybody listens and participates in this afternoon session, which is bannered by no less than a former vice chairman and also co-FEF fellow, Socio-Economic Planning Secretary, Dr. Arsenio Balisacan. Over to you, Peter.
Thanks, Toti. I'd like to join everyone in welcoming you all to this roundtable. It's a tumultuous time in the world today, and it's impacting the Philippines too. One of the most notable, of course, being high inflation. As we join RCEP, the Philippines will be entering a whole new era where opportunities are going to rise and no doubt problems too. COVID has rushed us into the digital world, and we have a relatively new government. All of this says there's going to be much change coming into the near future, and I look forward to what the Secretary will tell us about that future. Let me now introduce him. Secretary Arce is the best agriculture secretary we never had. He has 2 degrees in agricultural economics and was undersecretary there before in policy planning. The president actually offered it to him, but he turned it down. He, intelligent as he is, I would put him in the genius class of something over 140 IQ, recognized his expertise, where he has a doctorate in economics, was more needed at NEDA. And anyway, he'd done NEDA before with distinction under President Aquino, so he knew the role he had to play. So he's a perfect fit there, as he has over 35 years of experience in related work, not only here, but around the world. And much as I like him though, I'm never going walking with him. If we came across a ferocious grizzly bear while walking, he'd happily run away, leaving me to my fate. He's a marathon runner. I struggle to just walk, so I'd be dead. Let me introduce a good friend, a man I greatly admire, ladies and gentlemen, Secretary Arsenio Balisacan.
Thank you for the very kind introduction, Peter. I'm sure you're a faster runner than I do.
I don't think so, no.
Peter, Benedict Do Balabad, Ed Francisco, Tuti Chikiamco, all the members of MAF, Phoenix, and FEF. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I thank Peter and the organizers who made this roundtable discussion possible. I'm happy to discuss with you broader topics than just RCEP this afternoon. And then this is our country's economic outlook, particularly the gains we have made, the challenges we confront, and the prospects for our collective future. We may discuss the specific aspects of RCEP if that is of interest, but let me focus on these broad strokes on the Philippine economy in the medium term. As you all know, the country's performance last year displayed a robust economic recovery. Gross domestic product growth, or GDP, reached an average of 7.6% for the full year 2022. Better than most of our Asian neighbors, and beating market expectations. Under the Philippine Development Plan 2023 to 2028, the country's medium-term development blueprint, a GDP growth rate of 6 to 7%, ambitious as you may recognize, is targeted for this year, while a faster growth trajectory of 6.5 to 8% is planned for 2024 to 2028. However, there were no surprises when it came to sources of growth. The Philippine economy remains driven by consumption on the demand side and services on the supply side. In 2022, household final consumption expenditure contributed nearly 4/5 of our GDP growth, while services fits in close to 3/4 of our expansion. The reopening of our economy was critical to our strong rebound, as businesses, especially those catering to our tourism, retail, transportation, logistics, and education sectors, resumed their operation and expansion. Still, as seen on the screen, real GDP per capita remains slightly below the pre-pandemic level in 2019. This figure also shows how we had lost much ground during the pandemic, highlighting the need to build resilience to prevent severe socioeconomic scarring. And while inflation, initially driven by external factors, has now become a mainly policy issue on the domestic front. Although overall inflation slightly decelerated to 8.6% in February 2023 from 8.7% in January, the Philippines is presently an outlier among its Asian neighbors or Southeast Asian neighbors. While their inflation appears to have plateaued or moderated, the Philippine economy risks a slowdown as the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas or BSP is forced to tighten monetary policy to rein in continued upward price pressures. Where's the pressure coming from? You can see from the data that inflation from food and non-alcoholic beverages contributes nearly half to overall inflation. Inflation in these essentials, combined with inflation in other items such as housing, water, electricity, gas, and other fuels and transport, contributes nearly 80% to overall inflation. In February 2023, inflation for food and non-alcoholic beverages remained high at 10.8%. With the fading of pent-up domestic demand and the effects of BSP policy rates or policy rate hikes, expected to weigh in on consumer and investment appetite later this year, tempering food and energy price increases is an urgent imperative to ensure the sustainability of consumption growth and, equally important, protect the welfare of the poor and vulnerable, whose consumption baskets are disproportionately constituted by food. Toward this end, the NEDA, together with the Department of Finance, proposed the creation of the Interagency Committee on Inflation and Market Outlook, or IAC-IMO, with approval of President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. last March 7. This body shall advise the executive branch through the proposed Economic Development Group on measures that would keep food and energy inflation within the government's targets. Broadly, the IIC shall monitor the drivers of inflation, collect data on supply and demand conditions, and submit reports and timely recommendations to the President to ensure that the government addresses food and energy constraints while balancing the interests of local food producers, consumers, and the overall economy. Presently, the member agencies of this committee are already coordinating closely and preparing for the analytical work it will conduct. Now, let me pivot and focus my presentation on another equally important driver of our expansion in the next few years: investment. Allow me to contextualize by pointing to some historical trends which are informative to the discussion. Capital formation or investment has historically been a critical driver of sustained and rapid economic growth and industrialization for the economic powerhouses in East Asia, including Japan, South Korea, Singapore, and China. During the early stages of their development, investments constituted a significant share of their economy, enabling them to build the necessary physical infrastructure, upgrade their capacities to support their rapidly growing economies, take advantage of trade and export opportunities, and engage in technological upgrading enabled by fast expanding markets. Through massive sustained investment in critical infrastructure, these economies were able to attract private capital and encourage rapid business expansion. This trust ushered in quality job opportunities that offered higher wages and resulted in the so-called miraculous pace of poverty reduction observed by historians and economists. Southeast Asia, Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, and Vietnam were or currently are sustaining relatively high levels of investment to fuel rapid long-term growth. Where comparative data are available, the Philippines is observed to have lagged behind its more dynamic neighbors, but has been playing catch-up in the past decade or so. This shift has been due to the significant improvements in its fiscal space and the enactment of many game-changing reforms. This promising trend was interrupted by the pandemic, which, as you know, paralyzed many sectors of the economy, including construction activities. The administration of President Marcos recognized that expanding and upgrading infrastructure must be a critical component of its socioeconomic agenda. For the medium term, the government, through the medium-term infrastructure program, aims to sustain annual spending on infrastructure at 5 to 6% of GDP from 2023 to 2028. Building on the momentum gained from the work of past administrations, the Marcos administration shall program between 1 to 2 trillion pesos per year through 2028 for infrastructure. This program is the target committed by the NEDA Board Development Budget Coordination Committee last December 2022. The government has accomplished and is pursuing several initiatives to encourage greater local and foreign investment and private sector participation in infrastructure development. Most recently, the implementing rules and regulations, or IRR, of the amended Public Services Act were released last Monday, March 20, after extensive consultations with the administering agencies and legislatures. This development opens up critical sectors to greater competition, which is seen to drive investment and business expansion, job creation, technology transfer, and improvements in price levels and service quality. Further, last March 9, the NEDA board, chaired by President Marcos, approved the list of infrastructure flagship projects, or IFPs, under the Build Better, More program, and amendments of the NEDA joint venture or JV guidelines. These initiatives raise interest in promising investment opportunities in the country by strengthening and sustaining the push for infrastructure development and encouraging the participation of local and foreign players in critical economic sectors by creating a more enabling and competitive regulatory environment. Allow me to present some slides that may interest the investor community. First, the list of IFPs under the Build Better More program identifies 194 priority game-changing and transformative projects with an indicative investment requirement of about 9 trillion pesos. Most of these flagship infrastructure projects are in physical connectivity and water resources, including projects in irrigation, water supply, and flood management. 45 of these are seen to be financed through public-private partnerships or PPPs. IFPs shall be prioritized under the government's annual budget preparation and enjoy the benefits of expedited approval processes consistent with current legal frameworks. Indeed, given the country's limited fiscal space, the Marcos administration prioritizes the utilization of PPPs to support and complement its infrastructure drive. Pursuing PPPs will allow the government to harness the private sector's financial and technological resources, the ability to respond to market risk and opportunities in an agile manner, and the capacity to manage large-scale projects. 97 PPP projects collectively worth about 2 trillion pesos are in the pipeline. The Marcos administration's trust for infrastructure shall enable the transformation of the Philippine economic landscape. The country will achieve significant gains in physical and digital connectivity metrics, including indicators for active transport, rail, air, and sea transportation, and broader and higher quality internet access. We aim to see improvements across various sectors by 2028 or the end of the plan period. We expect to see greater access to safe water supplies, a more robust contribution of renewable energy to the power generation mix, and improved social infrastructure to improve Filipinos' overall quality of life. Better social infrastructure, enhancing human capital will also be crucial to ensure that the young Filipino labor force can capitalize on market opportunities made available by a rapidly expanding economy. We assure the private investors that the NEDA is actively pushing for critical reforms to regulatory frameworks to encourage greater private sector participation and investment in infrastructure development. Amending the PPP is considered a priority under the Legislative Executive Development Advisory Council or LEDAC's Common Legislative Agenda. The amendments, targeted to be passed within the year, seek to address the ambiguities in the existing law, address the bottlenecks and challenges affecting the implementation of the government's PPP program, and foster a more competitive and enabling environment for PPPs. The proposed changes will also align with the recent BOT Law IRR and NEDA JV guideline amendments. So allow me to end my presentation with some key messages for stakeholders. First, the government's economic team aims for rapid economic growth, 6 to 7% in 2023, despite the headwinds, to sustain our robust recovery. In the next 2 years, strong demand for consumption and investment will primarily drive the recovery. However, the domestic risk inflation may dampen this outlook. If output price pressures force BSP to raise its policy rates, given the lagged effect of monetary tightening, this policy response will likely slow down consumption and investment as consumers and investors hold off on their spending and plans to expand in the coming months. Therefore, the most crucial issue that government must urgently address is high inflation. Toward this end, the economic team, through this Interagency Committee on Inflation and Market Outlook, is quickly laying the groundwork for sound and timely recommendations to the President and the Cabinet to ensure that we achieve food and energy price stability at the soonest possible time. Lastly, with a view to the medium and long term, we must raise our investment levels in critical infrastructure by encouraging greater participation of foreign capital and the private sector as an engine of growth and innovation. Fixing our infrastructure backlogs is crucial to remaining competitive and dynamic vis-a-vis our Asian neighbors by attracting investments in growth drivers such as manufacturing, agriculture, tourism, mining, ICT, business process outsourcing, high-tech sectors, as well as the creative industry. The whole government remains firmly committed to achieving rapid, sustained, and inclusive economic growth that enables the reinvigoration of job creation and the acceleration of poverty reduction, all towards creating a prosperous, inclusive, and resilient Philippine society. Thank you and good day to all, and I look forward to the discussion that follows.
Thank you, Secretary Balisacan. We will be moving on now to the open. Thank you for giving us a presentation of how the present administration sees the current economic environment and the challenges it is facing. We will have an open forum to be started with our panel and then followed by participation from the audience. We will be reading from some of the questions posted in our application. So let me start the question and then I will segue over to the other members of the panel. First of all, Secretary Balisacan, you mentioned, of course, the PPP as a major plank of the current administration. May we know what PPP projects we can expect to see maybe quite soon?
Well, we have just approved under this administration the first one, and that is the UP hospital, cancer hospital that will be put up in Manila. We have many of those that are already lined up for approval, and you can see the specifics of those in the website of PPP Center and also the NEDA. But we admit that many of these will not happen in the next 2 years because many of them are under various stages of preparation, including the completion of required feasibility studies, for example. But the approach that we are taking is that the IFPs that we have indicated, have listed and approved by the president are the ones that will be given high priority in the approval processes, in assistance for securing all the necessary permits and all pre-construction processes that have to be dealt with in the bureaucracy. So we expect to have a faster rollout of those projects, especially realizing that the only way we could continue with this massive infrastructure development is to get those PPP rolling out quickly and using private sector resources, because as I said earlier, the fiscal space is quite limited, especially for next year.
Thank you, Secretary Balisacan. We move on to the next member of the panel, our BDO Capital Markets President, Ed Francisco. Ed.
Thank you, Todix. Good afternoon, Secretary. Secretary, may I just ask more questions on the RCEP? I tried to understand it. And I think the NEDA came out with an article and you were quoted as saying to the effect something like about 15 agri products corresponding to 33 tariff lines will be affected. It seemed to imply in the article that it was small, something around less than 2%. Sir, could you elaborate on that? Because for the layman, what does that mean, and what does that mean for the farmer? Was that your way of saying that the farmers shouldn't be threatened kasi maliit yung impact?
When we negotiated for the RCEP, we take into account the existing protection that our farmers already have, and we did not give up those protection for most of the crops, as we said, particularly the sensitive ones, including staples. So there's likely going to be little effect insofar as the direct effects of RCEP on our farmers concerned. However, the benefits of RCEP are quite huge if we put in place other measures beyond RCEP to benefit from those, to realize the potential benefits from RCEP. For example, with or without RCEP, we need to be addressing these constraints to investment and growth that have been well identified by the business community, by scholars, by practically all observers of the Philippine economy. And one of this is what the substance of the focus of my presentation today, the constraints faced by investors insofar as the infrastructure environment is concerned. We need to address that. That's part of that explains a large part of the high cost of doing business in the country, apart from the regulatory reforms. In other words, with RCEP, if we are able to also address the root causes of the low productivity of agriculture, farmers will even actually benefit from RCEP, because the RCEP opens up opportunities for our exports to China, to Japan, to Korea, and to all our neighbors. So I think the attention should be really to address the root causes of the low productivity in agriculture. That's why in my speech I really did not focus so much on RCEP, because we know that this not the deal breaker is going to be RCEP plus. Plus you have to do many of these factors that have been really burdening us and preventing us from competing globally.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Ed. The next one to ask a question would be the President of MAP, Attorney Benedicta Du Baladad.
Good afternoon, sir. Also on RCEP.
Good afternoon.
Because you also talked a while ago about the benefits and the growth that may be brought about by RCEP. So my question is, in your estimation of the GDP in the next 3 years, is RCEP, or is the benefit of RCEP already considered in the equation?
Let's put it this way. We assume that RCEP is going to be there. And then we also assume that we do and we pursue the reforms that have been postponed so long a time, and address this constraints to growth in investment that I mentioned earlier. Because even with RCEP, if you don't address these issues and the regulatory and the infrastructure and the issues with respect to property rights, particularly in agriculture, then even with RCEP, you are not going to benefit much from our membership in the group. So the trick is let's get this RCEP. There are potential benefits there. It certainly will enhance our capacity to grow and sustain our development, but it's going to be useless, fruitless, if we remain with the status quo insofar as policy, regulatory, and administrative reforms are concerned. So in effect, I would like to see that this RCEP is forcing us to do these things that we should have done decades ago, so that we can fully potential the benefits that expanded markets, out there would mean for not only for our local business, but for the Philippines as a whole.
Thank you, sir. One quick question. Are you in favor of constitutional amendments? And if so, what form?
I am in favor of removing restrictions to foreign investment. I am in favor of for example, opening up our practice of profession. I don't see why we are able to compete globally, send our labor workers abroad, and then we seem to be threatened when when we open our labor market to foreigners. I think that there are clearly benefits to opening up, removing those restrictions in the constitutions with respect to foreign investment. But that's so far as the limit concerned. But the problem, as expressed by many, is of course when you open it up, what gives up? I think that from a policy perspective, we should address the constraints that I mentioned earlier, while at the same time reducing uncertainty in the policy-making processes of the government. That is where I but I think if the constitutional reforms will limit itself to
Economic
this,
provision.
then I am okay. But of course, that's a big if.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dick. We move on now to the last member of our panel, the chairman and founder of Wallace Business Forum, Peter Wallace.
Thanks, Tody. Archie, I'm not only impressed by the fact that you can run marathons, but also that you can tie a tie. I had to wear one the other day. It took me 4 attempts to be able to get the tie correct. So I'm impressed. I'm on the advisory council of ARTA, where we are digitalizing, simplifying, and speeding the processes of government dealing with business. What I'd like to know is, what is NEDA doing as we move into this digital world to digitalize all of its services, and not only to digitalize them, but to simplify them, to get rid of those things that really aren't necessary, to speed the processes. Sometimes it can take many months to get approvals out of the ICC, for example. Can we reduce that considerably? Because I think, with your focus on infrastructure and PPP, which I believe are both excellent priorities to have, one of the other things is time. We don't have lots of time. And one of the biggest complaints of foreigners is that it just takes not only convoluted, but too much time to process through bureaucracy in the Philippines. And it is a major deterrent. So what specifically is NEDA doing and the ICC to improve this area?
Yeah, our PDP, the plan that we came up with, we crafted for the medium term, tries to address the regulatory issues, the ease of doing business issues there. And but one thing that is clear to us is this digitalization, and we need to speed up that process of digitalizing, particularly transactions in government. That way we can reduce many, all these transactions that will require face-to-face interactions. If we can do these transactions virtually online, those will be much simpler. That will reduce corruption and get things done quicker. We have been looking at these issues since we came in, because when we realized was that the rolling out, for example, of the national ID was very slow, and we have been and the president has been also very impatient with the slow progress there, and we have been trying to fix and catch up with the backlog so that we can have this digital ID at least largely completed within the year. Okay, so that's one. The other one,
Archie, could I meet with you sometime soon on that, because I have some solutions to the national ID that would speed it up.
Sure, we all welcome suggestions, recommendations to speed up the process, including using the data available there to for businesses, expanding opportunities for businesses, because that's the next frontier. Once you have the data, okay, how will you enable the
Exactly.
various
Yes.
stakeholders to make use of the data so that their transaction can be faster, more efficient, and more inclusive, particularly getting the benefits of those digital systems permitting all areas of the country, including rural areas. So that's one. The other one that we are focusing also is obviously the infrastructure, the physical infrastructure in particular, that supports the system, this digital economy. And there not only regulatory issues but also competition issues, and to make sure that the system expands rapidly and in a way that it's inclusive, it's promotes business and expands the economy. So I think that's where we would like to go, and I think this can be done quickly now that the PSA-RRR has been issued. We really look forward to seeing investments in telecoms that will support internet and the related businesses that will come with that. We would like to see investments in many areas of infrastructure. There are still many reforms to do, but I think that we are engaging quite actively now with Congress. We have been meeting regularly. In the NEDA board, for example, has been also meeting once a month to ensure that this at least once a month, to ensure that these projects are approved quickly as proposals become available. We have, as I mentioned, we are working closely with both members, both houses of Congress through the LEDAC processes, and ensure that we get those top high priority measures that we have identified in the PDP. One of these is the high in the priority is the amendment of the BOT law, which will further improve the governance of PPP, so that this vehicle for investment will become sustainable and will progress, permit the economy rapidly.
How often is the LEDAC meeting?
Well, we agreed to meet at least a quarter, but more often than before the end of the at the beginning of the session, we will meet again. That's what the last agreement. But we probably meet before the SONA, so to make sure that there is a there's that commitment to get these measures. So far, it has been working well. Both members of Congress have been quite supportive with our effort. As you know, NEDA is the secretariat of the LEDAC, and so we actually play a role in driving the whole process.
If I remember rightly, President Ramos met 81 times during his career, more frequently than once a month. He frequently met with them so that the two branches of government were working together to move things forward quickly. And
Yes.
perhaps President Marcos would like to consider it at least monthly meetings of LEDAC.
There's the full LEDAC that will meet, say, once a quarter, but there is also a smaller group that's called the executive committee of that LEDAC. It's a much smaller,
Okay.
yeah, and that can meet more often. Peter.
That's good. I like small groups. Big groups get nothing done.
Toti, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Secretary, a follow-up question to what Peter mentioned about the LEDAC. Would it be advisable, Mr. Secretary, for the whole LEDAC, including the Senate, to meet once a month and to include in the major items, the first three items, the progress of the programs and projects, as well as the action plan needed to ensure the attainment of these projects associated with addressing the supply side of the inflation problem. I think there is an element of urgency, and that is why both key members of Congress, as well as the executive, should meet on this matter to manifest the urgency. So, because without that commitment, it's not easy for the public to appreciate that it is given the highest focus by the administration. So may I kindly suggest or kindly convince the president to meet once a month? Thank you.
Yeah, well, that now that everybody is settled, I think we can consider that. But as I said, there are many opportunities for meetings outside of those that formal structure of the LEDAC. The executive committee of the LEDAC, which just composes the two leaders of both houses, the executive secretary, NEDA, and a few others, could meet more often, so that we can get those priorities identified by the LEDAC addressed without involving the whole LEDAC, which, as you know, is also quite difficult to convene. And it's happening. I think we have already the formal the structure, and we have been meeting. Actually, in our last meeting just a month ago, we have revisited what was committed during the last first few months after the ascendancy of the presidency.
Yeah.
President Marcos and I have agreed to. They have agreed to prioritize and 10 measures that they need to pass before the end of the session, and then we'll meet again when they reconvene in July to ensure that those measures that we have identified identified as high priority in the PDP will be addressed quickly. So
Yeah.
yes, we will.
Yeah, just to share you my modicum experience in this matter is for such an urgent matter like the food inflation, the presence of the president will really be extremely helpful in getting those action plans implemented, stricter monitoring. I think it will go a long way in helping address the inflation problems, Mr. Secretary. Thank you.
Let me just share, no, that the president has actually been meeting high levels, the cabinet several times, and has been monitoring the progress that we are making in addressing the inflation. It's not often that made in the or doesn't often hug the headline, but the president has been engaging high-level officials, including actually leaders of the private sector, discussing them with issues on what we can do together, private and public, to address these issues, particularly those involving logistics and regulatory measures that have been affecting the value, the marketing chain. So that I assure you that the president has been meeting us is on top of this inflation problem.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
I see a question posted in the chat section. I will read the one of former DPH Public Works Secretary Babe Singson. Secretary RC, as an immediate response on government seriousness of PPP, why not immediately fully privatize some of the rail projects still in government hands? MRT3, LRT2, and PNR commuter line, PNR long haul lines.
Yeah, those are in the those are currently in the IFPs. Yeah, in the infrastructure flagship project that list that the privatization or the PPP arrangements in the management of maintenance and operations of many of the rail systems is at top of our agenda. It will happen.
Secretary RC, I'd like to ask another question with respect especially to your field of expertise, agriculture. What is the government doing in order to modernize our agriculture and increase agricultural productivity? As you know, of course, a lot of our inflation is food related. So what is the government going to do, especially in terms of legislation?
I think what we have laid out are as a program of action for agriculture is contained in the chapter 5, that PDP, and there we have identified what those critical factors that have been hindering growth of productivity in agriculture, and we're that's what going to be the basis for our measures. Some of this includes, of course, your advocacy too, the property rights. We need to push that faster and harder. I think there are possibilities there, and but apart from that, we are the trust is to diversify farming, ensuring that technology, the required technologies and infrastructure support systems for diversification will allow, so that farmers can shift to higher value crops and other opportunities. There are no short-term what they call the quick measures that or solutions to addressing these problems, because this raising productivity in agriculture is not something that can be done overnight. We have to address the issues with respect to provision of appropriate technologies, provision of finance, provision of or access, not provision, but access to finance, consolidating and clustering of farms, even improving their access to physical and particularly digital infrastructure. The greater challenge is also the adoption of improved technologies, because improved technologies comes with or adoption of improved technologies comes with access to capital, and access to capital is also limited by the kind of property rights regime that you have in agriculture. So these are, untangling those problems will take some time, but there are low-hanging fruits that we need to speed up. For example, private sector can be encouraged, can be assisted in investing, for example, in logistics. One thing that we notice is that, as many of you may know, is that there's a huge margins between what farmers receive for their produce and what consumers pay for the farm produce, and one wonder why there's such huge margin. But obviously that presents an opportunity for investment, so that they can allow you to reduce those gaps. And here we see opportunities for marketing, for logistics, for value, for cold storage, and I still would like to see. I would like to see some of those innovative arrangements where the public sector and the private sector can collaborate, coordinate, can partner to get those investments in the farming, in the agricultural sector. So there are many things that we need to fix, and I think what we are most interested now, of course, in the short term, is those easy low hanging fruits, and if the private sector would have some ideas, we encourage them. That we are working with. We are often meet with the private sector advisory council, PSAC, and they have an agriculture cluster, and the ideas there that we are hearing are very useful, and we'd like to see the conversation continuing and actions toward materializing those conversations to happen.
Thank you, Secretary RC. Anybody else in the panel for follow-up questions? Dick?
Yeah, Totix, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry.
Yes.
Sorry,
Okay.
Dick, if you don't mind. Quick one lang. Secretary, no, because as the monetary board is expected to still increase rates, diba, to slow down inflation. I guess it's a balancing act, and then here you are naman trying to increase, of course, our GDP. Like what strategies are in place so that, diba, it's in a way conflicting, but what are the supply side policies, or what's the game plan so that the impact naman of a slower rates and possibly tempered demand will have naman on these other things you want to do, sir?
As I said earlier, I think the inflation that we are seeing is largely domestic, as opposed to during the early days of the pandemic, when that inflation was largely imported. and we see that that it's not really the excess demand that is creating that that push in the prices, but the supply. It's the bottlenecks in the supply chain. That's one, but there are also trade and policy issues to the extent that normally you can't get you have this importation and exportation as a kind of arbitrage, no, for when prices are high are increasing fast, that there are benefits from bringing in imports. But if you cannot bring in those imports to meet those to reduce the upward price pressure, then you have a problem. And I think that we have learned that looking at the experience in recent months, that number one, that our assessment of what's the situation, supply and demand situation is often uninformed. Some groups will say there's enough. Other groups will say there's not enough, and we are quite slow in reconciling those claims, so that the facts will prevail. So that's and then of course the claims are made depending whether to import or not to import, depending on who is making the claim, right? And so what we have recommended and approved by the president is a more independent group to advise the president and the cabinet on what the real situation is, and so that the producers' interests are considered, but so are the consumers' interests, and more importantly, the economy.
Yes, sir.
Because high inflation does hurt the economy in the longer term, and it does hurt everyone in the end. So that's the motivation for the setting up that advisory group that will be basically the food sector will be basically chaired by NEDA, so that you can look at the stakes of the various stakeholders balanced when we recommend decisions, and whether we need to import to close the gaps between supply and demand, or things like that. So that's one. I think that generating that information that help inform decisions by our policymakers is crucial, and it has to be done on a regular basis and quick. For example, I think that even when there is a need to import, for example, because prices are high or have been abnormally high, even during, say, harvest.
Yes.
But when the imports come in and harvest time is simply not a good decision outcome. So we have to see to it that those decisions are made at the right time, so that imports don't come in when precisely farmers are harvesting, because that could dampen the prices. And it's not also politically, even if prices are still very high during harvest time, but politically it's a wrong move to get those imports the right time when farmers are are harvesting. So that's crucial. I think that the private sector, we are also urging private sector to help in the generation of that information, so that proper decision, informed decision can be made with respect to importation of agricultural products.
Tony, can I ask one last question before we go to open forum? RC, in the news today, the Supreme Court ruling that granted LGUs a much greater share of national revenues was being considered for delay because something that should have been obvious to the Supreme Court, the LGUs aren't ready. They aren't able yet to be able to take this extra money and use it competently. And you have been tasked with studying what needs to be done and the timeline to do it. Would you like to comment on that?
Are talking about the devolution of services
Yes.
to
Yeah,
LGUs?
the mandamus ruling.
Yeah, the Mandanas
that gave extra
Garcia.
money.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the Mandanas Garcia ruling that mandated the
More money for the
yeah,
LGUs.
the more money is the 40% of government revenues.
Yep.
Going to LGUs. Yeah. All right. The issue really is that the Supreme Court decision is that that 40% has to be given to the LGUs, right? Okay. But that will also mean that that the services that are identified in the local government code have to be now fully devolved to the LGUs now. There are quite complications of that. One is the LGUs are very heterogeneous, right? They have very different circumstances, both technically, financially, administratively. Financially, for those LGUs who are quite rich, like first and second class LGUs or provinces, cities, they may have no problem absorbing all the devolved services, including irrigation, hospitals, health centers, local roads, but for the poorer LGUs, like your fifth and sixth class municipalities or provinces, they may have problem with absorbing that those functions. So there is that mismatch between what they get and what they will need now to provide. So the issue is how can we now comply, national government comply with the Supreme Court decision, and we need to comply, by the way, while at the same time ensuring that services to our poor LGUs will not suffer as a result of that devolution. So that is something that has to be, from the point of view that the president noticed, that has to be studied well, so that when we roll it out, the full devolution, we can ensure that that proper principles, guidance are provided, such that those LGUs that are not ready yet for the devolution, for example, if they don't have the capacity or the capability to provide the services, they don't have the technical expertise to run hospitals or or construct, build irrigation systems, then can those be? Where is the role of the remaining role of national government agencies be? That has to be well identified, to be crafted, so that again, both efficiency and equity objectives are met. And so the president has instructed NEDA to provide the the framework, the conceptual and operational framework for implementing the Mandanas rule.
Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Balisacan. I just want to make a comment. Secretary RC, if the Senate version of the debt condonation bill or the new Emancipation Act is passed, this will, I think, free the rural leasing market. I remember we were talking about that before. You said that an active leasing market can really help farmland consolidation, which we need. So I hope if the Senate version of the bill is passed, that then you can convince the Department of Agrarian Reform not to put up any new restrictions in the implementing rules and regulations, and promote, hopefully promote farmland consolidation through leasing.
There is a good appreciation in the cabinet and that need to for consolidation and clustering as a vehicle for improving productivity in agriculture. So I think that's a big, and we will look into that. But I have not seen the version yet that was passed by both Congress. Yeah.
Hopefully that will be passed, within the session. But anyway, I have another question coming from Alex Echucha about the PDP goal on learning poverty or the lack of it, and the low target for agricultural growth for the next 5 years. So he's asking whether the PDP is a learning poverty goal, or and says if possible, if to increase the target for agricultural growth.
Yeah.
RC, can I elaborate on my question?
Well, sure.
Go ahead,
Yes.
Alex.
Thank you, RC, for responding to my suggestion to post the full copy of the PDP document towards the end of December, which happened actually on the first working day of January. Okay. So I read the whole 480-page document. And my question is relating to the actual goal setting. And the good thing about the PDP document is that there is a results matrix for every chapter. And there's actually a section on legislative agenda to achieve that. But I'm concerned about two things. The first one is that in page 54, results matrix 2.2.2, the learning poverty baseline as of 2019 is 90.9%. But in most other pages, there is a goal per year, 23, 24, 25, 26, 28. This time, the goal is just decreasing. There is no quantitative goal on reducing the learning poverty rate from 90.9 in 2019. And this does not even consider yet the fact that we have stepped back a big deal because of the pandemic lockdown on the schools, 2020 and 2021. So I'm saying if there is no goal specific, any result below 90% is considered achieving the goal. So this is both a question, and I'm sure if you have a chance to review that, you can probably say, why don't we shoot for, say, reduction from 90% to 50%? My second point is related to agriculture and inflation. In December 7, the World Bank launched its book on Philippine economic update. And they have a specific chart there which shows that their forecast of agriculture growth from 2023 to 2028 is 0.1, 0.1, 0.1, all the way to 2028. So I asked Ralph Van Doorn, the Dutch economist based in Jakarta, why why 0.1 is the best number that their model could come up with. And he said, based on what we know, and based on what we know is not happening, that is the best number that we could come up with. Now, I'm worried about that because the PSA has reported for January and February, the inflation rate for the bottom 30% of households in the Philippines. And the inflation rate there is 9.7% for January and 9.7% for February. So if agriculture is not going to grow faster, and in this PDP 2023 to 2028, the growth target for agriculture forestry sector is between 1.8 to 3.3, again for all the 5 years next. So that means it's lower than the overall growth rate, meaning may iwanan na naman yung sector na yan. And these are all related, and you're the foremost expert on agriculture that I know of course. So I'm sure you've thought a lot about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Let me respond to the last one quickly because that's the issue I want to answer. It's not uncommon for agriculture, especially in the middle stages of development, to grow slower than the rest of the economy. In fact, the stylized fact of development is that it's the industry, it's the services that grow faster as development proceeds, especially even as agriculture is growing initially high. But the poverty is reduced in agriculture in rural areas, partly because the growth outside of agriculture is also benefiting agricultural households. In other words, if you look at fast industrializing economies in their early stages of development like us, if you see now at Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, you will see that increasingly as their industrialization proceeds, their agricultural households income, the income of agricultural households increasingly comes from these non-agricultural sources. Members of the family of agricultural households become employed or become the recipient of incomes earned from outside of the economy. So poverty is reduced. In fact, that's a history of miracle poverty reduction in Asia. That's precisely the story that agricultural household poverty in agricultural households decreased fast, even as agricultural growth is slower than the rest of the economy. And that's precisely what the plan is trying to achieve, that we enable the economy to the rest of the economy out of the agriculture to grow fast. And that can happen if we address these constraints to investment and structural transformation that I talked about earlier. So that then labor from low quality or low productivity areas, including those in agriculture, would have a place to move on. And that contributes to substantial poverty reduction. That's a story of many countries that have experienced rapid poverty reduction. Okay, with respect to the issue on the learning poverty, Alex, we admit that when we were crafting the PDP, our DepEd was still trying to come up with a plan for our education sector, our basic sector. And at the time that we actually launched our PDP, that's what the time that when the DepEd launched the results of its own work to mapping out its development for the sector in the next 6 years. So we'll look into that, Alex, because they have done that that exercise already to address the learning poverty particularly in basic education.
Okay, I'll be reading here a question from Mr. Pascual, Jake Pascual. What potential impact on the Philippine economy does NEDA see of the recent US and European bank failures? And what is government doing to mitigate the ripple effects?
Well, I had the chance of chatting with our BSP governor the other day, and he assured us that our banks are not that exposed, and the fundamentals that we see here are quite solid and do not share the characteristics of the banks in the US and in particular in the EU. So I don't think that will be badly affected. I don't think that it's going to be any worse than what we have during the Asian financial crisis and in 1997, 98, as well as in the global financial crisis in 2007, 2008, no? And then we quite surprisingly, we were quite resilient, no? Compared to our neighbors, no? Our banking system was quite resilient. So I think I had to take the assessment of Philip, Governor Medalla, seriously, and I think that I do believe him.
Thank you, RC. Maybe just give one last question. Read from Attorney Ronnie Penarroyo. The new administration has often declared mining as one of the vital drivers of the economic growth. What has government done so far to achieve this goal?
Yeah, it's quite a ticklish issue, but our own view is that there is so much potential in our mining sector, especially that when I saw the data and what are the potentials for resources that can be extracted profitably, it's enormous, and we haven't even it's a big part of it. And so we are quite missing opportunities for growth. While we are of course mindful of the environmental issues and equity issues with respect to mining, I think those should be addressed and can be addressed. There are many models that one can learn from, so that we can have a sustainable mining and a mining development that's also inclusive, that will benefit those who are displaced from mining areas. So I think that if we can realize those potentials in the mining sector, we can have another major source of growth. And we do share that view. I mean, the economic team, cabinet share that view.
Thank you, Secretary Balisacan. It's 2:25. I'm closing the open forum section. I will turn it over now to the Wallace Business Forum Chairman, Peter Wallace.
Thanks, Toti. Thank you, Dick, Ed, and Toti, and all of you who've joined us today. I trust that you found this a very informative conversation, as I have. It was, I think, a wide-ranging, lively, open forum where I think we learned a lot of where the Marcos administration's going and what its priorities are and are going to be. So I'd like to thank the Secretary again for sparing the time to join us. It was very much appreciated, very helpful for all of us, I'm sure. And I thank him again and look forward to seeing you all at a subsequent event. So thanks all. That's the end of the meeting.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Secretary. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.